Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing good. Today is a beautiful sunny Saturday, so I decided to record at least the intro of the video in the sun. I need to get out of the studio sometime. It's definitely not inspiring to spend so many hours inside the same room. Anyway, in this video I want to give you 5 tips that help me get a better mix. I know mixing is a struggle, both for a new producer but also for experienced producers sometimes, because there are some barriers like bad treated room, bad sounding room, or speakers or headphones, but also there are some mistakes that we commit that we do, and that are leading to a bad mix. So I will try to give you a little help on that. Let's get it started. Okay, so using good samples, what does that mean? So I know this can be a very generic kind of advice, especially when you start. You don't really know what a good sample is, what a bad sample is. To me, good sample is a sample that has not been over treated, both for one shots and loops. For example, on a kick, when it's over processed, over compressed, you hear that there are maybe low frequencies, but you don't hear the punch of the kick because it's too compressed. Or a bass sound can be maybe not coming out properly of your speakers. Hi-hats might have very strong resonances when they are over EQ'd or oversaturated. So let's try to find good libraries. My main websites are Gold Baby Samples. That's my main one when I want very good one-shots. Also they have a big collection of one-shots. They are recorded straight out of the machine. They can have some basic treatment, like they run them through tape machines, so studio stuff, you know, nothing digital. I love them. There are also very particular kind of sounds, so you can find your own sounds that nobody use there. The other company that I really like is Sample from Mars. Same concept, they record out of the drum machines or out of the synthesizers. Then when I want to look for real instruments, I go on Loop Cloud. They have an incredible library. You can find jazz, African, Indian, world sounds, whatever you want they have, and they are also pretty good. The second thing that I look for on one shots is that they must be mono for me, especially with kicks, snares. I make sure they are not panned to left or to the right. If they are, I make them mono, but sometimes they can also be out of phase. So that's happened to me on some libraries. So if that happens, you can feel that it's wide, it's overly wide, okay, when that happens. And so I'd avoid those samples. On loops, I prefer loops that are not too wide. Again, I prefer loops that are not made of too many different sounds, because if I want to arrange the track, then I want to have some freedom. So maybe if there are a couple hats, that's okay, some snares, that's okay, but if it's too complex, I prefer not to use it. But that's my taste. So about layering, it's a technique that I use. It's a very good technique to add thickness to a sound, maybe layering a very thin hi-hat with a stronger one. I love layering snares with claps, but yeah, you have to be careful about resonances, especially when you start layering a little bit too many sounds, especially with hi-hats. Always make sure you're not adding up too many energy on some frequencies. Place an EQ on the single sound or on the group and take care of those frequencies by boosting, finding the resonant frequency and then taking it down. About kicks, I really discourage you to use layering. It's way better to find a nice sample from the start. If the 2 samples that you're layering carry low frequencies, there can be phase issues, okay, anti-phase problems, and this will decrease the power of your kick, will make it worse. So find a good kick sample and use that. Lastly, about layering loops is pretty much the same thing. If you start layering too many different sounds, for example, you take 2 or 3 loops with a clap in the same position, you add 3 claps one on top of each other, so this will add volume to that clap, and you will have to take care of that. Otherwise, when you go mixing the track, maybe you have some huts that are the right volume, but in the same loop you have a clap which is summing up to other claps of other loops, and this will create an unbalanced volume. So you can automate in the clip the volume of the loop. You can use compressors, of course you're adding a layer of complexity to the mix, or you can definitely try to build your own loop so you use the sounds that you want. This will also create, as I said in the first tip, problems while arranging the track, because if you want, for example, to take that snare out of the loop when you are in the break, it's pretty hard to do that sometimes. So using one-shots, creating your own loops is better. Where I use loops is more on the background side, on the back part of the track. I like to place loops that are quite low with the volume, and so they just add the groove to the track, but they're not too prominent, and so they are very controlled in the background. That's at least my way of using most of the loops they use. Oh, then guys, I was freezing outside. Third tip is about correlation between kick and bass. I realized during the sessions that a lot of times I see people using very long kicks, okay, and then they use also a very present and long sub bass. This of course create interference between kick and bass. Even if you use a sidechain is usually quite a short volume reduction on the bass line to leave space for the kick. You can make it longer of course, but usually what I suggest is choose the kick depending on the type of bass line you have. If you have a bass line with very long notes, then you might want a shorter kick so you leave more space for the bass line. If instead you have a bass line which is very percussive, you might want to have a longer kick so that it fills the space left by the bass line. Another thing is about tuning the kick. When you have a very long kick, maybe in that case it's better to tune your kick so that it's in tune with the root note of the scale you're using for the bass line. But when you have a very short kick, which is more like an impulse rather than a sub bass, in that case I'd say that it's not super important to tune the kick. Keeping it simple, I'd say it's my philosophy now. When I started, I used to use so many plugins to reach whoever knows which kind of sound I was aiming for. I was watching a lot of tutorials, so probably I was willing to try all of the plugins that I saw in these tutorials. But the point is that if you use a plugin and you don't know how to use it, you ruin your track, you ruin the soul of your track, especially when you start compressing too much, when you start to EQ too much your sounds. You take away life from sounds. Now what mixing is for me, I say 80 to 90% about leveling all of the sounds, so finding the right levels for all of the sounds. Then when the level is right, what I might do is a bit of corrective EQing. So if there are frequencies that I don't like, if there are low frequencies that are not needed, I can take them away. But I no more cut all of the sounds to clean the shit out of them so that they lose all of their life. I don't compress sounds that don't need to be compressed. Keep it simple. Try just playing with volume. Try playing with effect, with creative effects, but mixing effects, advanced mixing effect, I would be very careful at using them. Tip number 5 is about home mastering. Home mastering is a very simple type of mastering that may imply an EQ on the master, may imply a glue compressor on the master, and lastly a limiter. So the point of limiting, of pushing the loudness of your track is for me, seeing where the limiter is triggered, what makes the limiter work, and so activate the gain reduction. That helps me to understand if some elements are a bit too loud. For example, sometimes it happens that my clap triggered the limiter too much, so I realize the clap is too loud. Also, listening the track to a little bit louder level uncovers some resonances on the hi-hats that you can't hear when you listen the track to a quiet volume. So a lot of the problems in the mix come out when I do my home mastering, and so I always do that before sending the track to a real mastering engineer, because if I send it with mixing mistakes, he can't correct them. So don't think the mastering will correct your mistakes on mixing. You need to send away a mix which is nearly perfect, and home mastering helps me to unveil those mistakes. The sixth and last tip is about monitor calibration. Is a process that really changed my life. We mainly have studios in rooms that are not professionally acoustically treated, and so room of course influences a lot the way we listen to the music that comes out of our speakers. Monitor calibration consists in measuring with a mic the room frequency response, and then the software understands if this response is flat or if there are bumps or dips in the frequency response, and so he applies an EQ to the output of the monitors in order to compensate for those problems. In my case, the improvement was huge. Before, I was having problems when I moved from speakers to headphones because it seems to be a completely different thing. Now I can completely rely both of them. When I move from speakers to headphones, more or less what I hear is the same, and so I don't need any more car tests. I don't need any more to check my track on different systems to see if it sounds right. Even if you calibrated your monitors, but most of all if you haven't, low frequencies can still be a problem because rooms are more problematic on the lower frequencies, and also we usually have small speakers that don't reproduce low frequencies very well. So my suggestion in that case is mix your lows in your headphones. Headphones are not influenced by the room, so when you're not sure if your bassline is at the right volume, put on your headphones and have a mix of the lows on your headphones, and I think comparing monitors to headphones you can end up with a good mixing of everything. Okay guys, so this was the last tip. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new. You know, I have a Patreon there we put into practice what I told you today. So we do mixing sessions, we do mastering sessions, we do of course production sessions. I suggest to take a look to my Patreon, to the different tiers, and decide if you want to be part of it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and to put a like to this video if you find it useful. Thanks guys, and I'll see you next time.